Bringing Greece pioneer families to life. Join co-authors Marie Poinan and Joanne Ward-Snyder for an in-depth look at their 4-year journey. Through interviews with descendants and careful genealogical research, they uncover the photos, documents, maps, and stories that bring pioneer life in the early town of Greece into focus. Now let the program begin.
The following is a production of the Greece Historical Society.
Second Tuesday's Stories, Exploring Our Past, presented by the Greece Historical Society. Sponsored by members of the Greece Historical Society and by the advertisers in our newsletter.
The space for the event is provided by the Greece Public Library. Please support your local library.
Bringing Greece pioneer families to life, recorded May 12th, 2026.
And for anybody that has not joined us before, the Greece Historical Society is a 501(c), but we are chartered by the State Education Department, and we have a nice little museum just down the road here a little bit. A couple things coming up. We are not having any programs in June, July, and August, but this coming Sunday is our grand opening of our Erie Canal in Greece exhibit. So join us between 2 and 4 on Sunday. And we also have a new exhibit on scouting in Greece, which got memorabilia from Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, and Indian Guides. And on June 22nd, we have our annual Strawberry Festival, Dessert Tasting Festival. Last year it was a beautiful day. We had over 500 people. So I hope you can join us and then come back here in September. So our speakers tonight, unusual greeting. Back in March of 2000, a few people remember, nobody could see anybody. So Marie and Joanne met on the phone, I think.
Yeah, phone and Zoom.
Said, you know, we ought to write a story about Greece families. Now, Marie is from Shalat, and Joanne is from Fairport, so I think this even makes it more interesting. Now, the first book came out. People had the first book in their hands at Christmas, 9 months later. The second book took a little bit more work, but I'm sure they're going to tell you about it tonight. So who goes first?
Marie.
I'm the lucky one. I apologize for my voice. I've lost it a couple of days ago, so I'll do the best I can, and I'll try to talk into this so that you can hear me a little bit better. Is that
Thank
okay?
you.
Can you pick it up? Okay. With our pioneer families of Greece, as Bill mentioned, we didn't know each other at all. Luckily, we got along together because we spent days on the phone. We went through Zoom, we went on the computer, and we decided to pick some of our families, and some of the families actually picked us. So the way we approached the entire project is the fact that everybody has a story to tell. Every family that lived in Greece had a story. Some of them are more well-known than others, and the Historical Society, along with everybody else, knows the more famous names. But there's a lot of families that have never, ever been written before. And those are the ones that we wanted to attack. And our biggest project was we wanted it from descendants. We didn't want to just write about it. We wanted people that were descendants and belonged to that family to actually help us out. So the result is the 2 books. We have 50 families plus in each book. I'm not going to go through the names, but if you recognize the names, if you're not familiar with either one of our books, you can take a look, and there's a lot of familiar names, and there's a lot of names that nobody's ever heard of before. That was book 1, and then book 2. The reason why book 2 took a lot longer to put together than the first one is the first one we had a lot of families that had done their own genealogy. They had gone back many, many generations. They had pictures. They were doing their own families, and it was very easy. This time around, some of the people had no pictures at all. Some of the families that we wanted to do had absolutely nothing. We had to run down the descendants to find out more from different states because we couldn't find out the information from people who lived right here in Rochester. So believe it or not, a lot of the time was spent chasing people, trying to find them, and then once we started doing a family, we would go to the ends of the earth to try to find the most information we could, even if it didn't make it into the book, so that we could put it in our files for Greece Historical. And the reason why we wanted to do the book is to showcase all of the people for the bicentennial. That's how it started. And we wanted to make sure that we could also help people that came to Greece Historical to help you do your own family research. So the book had twofold purpose. These were the logos that we used for the bicentennial. And the people, for the purpose of putting an end date, we had to make sure that the family was living in the town of Greece by 1872. Now, a couple of our families left before 1872, and those are the ones that you're going to find in volume 2, because we want to try to find people that weren't really talked about or written about before. And we're going to see that a lot of these families, we find them out west and in other states. We don't have any of them left in the Rochester area. So in the storytelling, the idea is to take the facts that we got, census records, going on ancestry, anything that we found about the family or information that we got from the family themselves, we had to take that and make it into a narrative. We wanted a story that we could tell so that you would be interested in reading it, not just names and dates and when they were born and when they died and where they lived, but is there a house today that you can go see that was here back when the pioneers were living there? Is there a house today that you wouldn't even recognize that was here 200 years ago? Those are the kind of things that we wanted to put into the book. So we wanted to make sure that we got the narrative. And then in terms of getting the photos, a lot of the photos we had in our files, a lot of the photos were strictly from the families, and that was when we had pay dirt, because a lot of the families that we didn't have a lot of pictures of them, and as we go through, you're going to see some of the pictures that were just an absolute goldmine to find from the families, and they shared them with us. Nobody had ever looked beyond their family, and nobody was ever interested in finding out about their families. You know, they said, why are you interested in my family? Because we're interested in all families. So that's how we approached it. And then once we got through and we figured out that the family was here by 1872, then the fun part started, because the people had to start doing paperwork. The storytelling, yeah. The online research, we went as far as England and Ireland. We contacted colleges and universities. One of the finds that we had was a 1608 Bible that we found, and Joanne had where was the college thesis from? What state was that from?
I think it was from Iowa.
Iowa. So she found a college thesis that talked about one of her families. So we'll talk about that in a little bit as we go along. Now, the problems that we had, a lot of the families in book 2, they needed help. They were not cooperative in terms of getting paperwork back, in terms of you have to sign off and make sure that you're signing the release. And getting the information. A lot of people do not know how to send information on a computer. They were taking pictures and, going to Staples and making Xerox copies. Well, when you try to scan a Xerox copy, you see big long lines and all of that. So don't waste your money at Staples trying to do that. Take a picture with your phone. It will come out 100 times better than taking a Staples picture and paying for it. So that was part of the problem. Joanne and I had to do family trees for some of the people. They didn't know anything past their grandparents. So we did their family trees for them, found relatives for them that they didn't even know that they had, and some of them went back to the Mayflower, as you'll find out. We also contacted the family on Ancestry. Both of us have Ancestry accounts. So once we found family members here and we were looking for family family. We went and looked at other family trees who were submitting pictures. We contacted those people and wrote to them, asked permission. Where did you get this photo? Can I use it in the book? We told them what we were going to do with the photograph, and it was going to be published. And all of the proceeds go to the Historical Society. Neither one of us made a dime doing the book. It was meant as a fundraiser for Greece Historical. So then the last part is the fun part. Where did some of this stuff come from? I had a lady who spent $5 at a garage sale and brought me a family album. It turned out it belonged to the Kirk family. So you never know when you're going to find stuff. I contacted a couple of people on Ancestry. I said, oh, you know, could I use this photograph? This is the one I'm interested in posting. Oh, I don't belong to that family. I bought it at a garage sale. So a lot of the times, a lot of the pictures that we had, you know, came from people that spent $5 or $10 at a garage sale just because they were nice old pictures. And now they finally have not only a home for them, but they have the story behind the pictures that they actually took. And then we wanted to also solve mysteries. The mystery of where did the descendants go? Why is there nobody left in Rochester? What happened to the family while they were here? Do they have branches that went elsewhere, or are there other names that we don't associate with the families that we know of? So, you know, we start with a census and look at that, you know, voter rolls, anything like that. But, you know, we never know what's going to happen in terms of where we're going to find stuff.
Okay, for the families, what I tell people is we did not choose the families. The families chose us. This was set out to be a bicentennial project, and it was also a pandemic project. So Marie did half of them in the books. I did the other half. We worked in silos. She did mostly North Greece. I did along the ridge in Manitou, because that's where our families happened to be. But anyway, so we put out in social media, in magazines and whatever, and said, was your family in Greece before 1872? How would you like to do this? And so probably 95% of the families we present. I have one in the first book that was my practice one that I did. It was an unusual name. It was Reneth. They did not apply. And actually, it's the only one I don't have a family member that participated in, but they ended up being very interesting. And then I have one in the second. So we, the families chose us. So our guide, that they were here in 1872, we used the 1872 map of Greece. They would have been on it if they were a landowner. If they were a tenant farmer or a non-landowner, a renter, they would not have been on it. So then we would have gone to the 1870 census for verification. We had them fill out pedigree charts. We made them work for it a little bit to get in the book. And some of them, as Marie said, didn't get past their grandparents. It's fine. Marie and I figured out if they were here by 1872. Next slide. And then the release. The release is really important. We made a release. Most of them, I had them fill them out, but there's a few that just wrote us an email that says you can use my pictures. But the release covered that we could use it in print or in digital format. We also asked them for permission with this to be able to use it for educational programs like Tonight or our posters. And then we asked if we could keep their information on file at the Historical Society in case other researchers come through. Some people limited us to just use in the book. Others gave us carte blanche, which was wonderful. So people were generous. The benefits to the Historical Society of doing this is we fulfill our mission of collecting, recording, and preserving Greece town history. We obtain photos and stories and documents that we never had. It's community education like tonight. And as Marie said, it's an organizational fundraiser. Marie and I don't get any money. In fact, it probably cost us some because some places we had to pay for our photographs to get them released. So anyway, but it was a joy to do. Next, the benefits to the descendants. That's the Lay family. They were here in 1809, and they lived where the Verhaltzes used to be. And so they get to have their family story told in a publication and preserved. And the exciting thing for me is, like with this family that came in to visit us, their kids got excited and their grandkids got excited. So those are some positives. They had potential with our research to meet different lines of the tree. When you reach out to different lines, you get more pictures, you get more stories, and you collect. So, and so things worked out well. They got our expertise as researchers. I'm a retired nurse, but I've been doing genealogy for 40 years. And people like Dick Halsey, who's back there and runs our Monroe County Gen web page, has, if you're ever doing your family research locally, everything on it that you could ever want or a direction to. So we have a very generous local community that has transcribed records, copied records, Rochester Church Indexing Project. There's lots of things available there. So we know where to find this stuff. And actually, Dick gave me garage sale stuff on the Mitchell family, the Thomas Mitchell family. So that was very nice and timely. And then the family gets recognized as a Grease Pioneer family, and all the families that contributed got a Pioneer certificate recognizing their family as that. Permissions are a pain in my rear.
I'll cover that.
We have over 1,250 maps and pictures in here. Every single one of them is credited, and every single one of them has permission, okay? Copyright is complex, and I'm not the expert on it, but you always need to check ownership, and I can't tell you how many times I had photo envy on Ancestry and asked them to give me permission to use it and write it out, and they said, oh, it's not my picture, and then we're having to trace it. Personal photographs are owned by the photographer and their heirs. Before 1978, the copyright on those personal photographs is 95 years. After 1978, it's the life for the photographer plus 70 years. So just a little bit. So people that willy-nilly put stuff up online, it's not right, it's not ethical, it's not with integrity. But I do have a caveat. If the family photos are before those times, I wouldn't be very happy, and I bet you wouldn't be very happy that because of copyright rules that I just used your family photo willy-nilly. So regardless of when that personal photo came in, I got permission. For institutional permissions, some of them signed it, some of them had their own kinds of things because I got things from museums. If you go to Wegmans and ask for some of their archival photos, it goes through consumer relations, their management team, and their lawyers. They do give them to you for free. If you go to get something from the Mayflower Society, not only do you have to sign all the papers, but they want $150. So I found alternate ways around that. So
You were very creative.
I did. So again, we spent a huge amount of time on getting legal permission. You can go on. When in doubt, ask. I'll let you finish after this slide. So our collaboration with the descendant families, with us, the authors and researchers, we got a much broader picture of the Pioneer family, and working together, our output was much greater. And I'll do a case study in a little bit about that than had we've been working independently. And we very much appreciate our descendant families. We have a few of them here tonight, and without them, this book would not come alive. They were wonderful, they were awesome. We frustrated each other at times, but it's what happens. Okay.
Yeah, the end result is hard work with everybody concerned. We lost, excuse me, we lost several people along the way that were contributors. In fact, in my husband's family, we lost 3 cousins within 6 months of each other, so none of them got to see their families in book 1, even though they contributed very much. So those are for both of our families. Then what we did was, once we got the information, there's a lot of information that we cannot, because of copyright rules, put in, like census records. You can't, those are owned by the government. They're on Ancestry. It's owned by Ancestry. You cannot just put that in the book or anything where you are being paid, to sell a book. You cannot use it. So therefore, we had to make sure that we could use some of the information. So we did that in the posters, because for the educational part, being a 501c3, we could use that information on the posters in the museum, or like in a program like this, you're gonna see things that we could not put in the book as such. So that made a lot of difference, because we probably had at least 150% more information than you see in the book, because of the fact that we could not use that. So we created the posters. We did 5 to 7 families each 2 months, and it was in the dining room. And we had a lot of the family members came just to see the posters, and a lot of family members got to meet other branches of their family who happened to be there on the same day. They didn't even know each other, but they saw each other, when they were visiting the posters. Then, as Joanne mentioned, everybody got the Pioneer Certificate. We did over 300 Pioneer Certificates. Bill Sowers signed every single one. He created the seal and did the seals, and then we created one for each family. And we still have people that have not picked theirs up from November. So we're still in the process of handing them out. It was hundreds of dollars in postage from the society to mail. Germany was the farthest one we went. And in terms of descendants, Joanne won that because she had an Air Force guy who was stationed in Saudi Arabia. So she won for the farthest descendant. We were racing each other. So let's meet some families.
Okay. So has anybody heard of the Coffey family? Yeah, how do you know them?
Member of the church at one time.
Okay, very good. Well, most other people have not. And this is a family of 6 orphan children and young adults who migrated from Ireland between 1848 and 1851. It's a family that's never been written about before. And so that's one of the pleasures of doing this story. The original request came from my mother's first cousins, David Johnson and Teresa Sperling. And they only knew that their grandmother, Eliza Jane Coffey Johnson, who was a wonderful grandma and a wonderful mother, had a father that came from Ireland. They didn't know anything else about their early life here in Greece. And they had no pictures. So no story, no pictures, no information. So that's where we started with. Next. Okay. After I was able to find 11 additional descendant family members, and by chasing their tree down, but by searching newspaper articles, online books, genealogy sites. They came from 6 different states. I also had a genealogist photographer from Ireland to help me give some color, because again, you got to look for things. This is a case study which shows how you go and use your imagination. Look outside the book to be able to make a story where you have none to start with. And then the Colorado Springs Pioneer Museum also gave me information. And then our story starts in Caltra, Galloway, Ireland. The nice thing about Google Maps is they let you use their stuff in a publication. You just have to put the copyright year. So I did that, and I researched Caltra. I did find out later they're Irish Catholic. In the era, in the 1840s when they were there was one Catholic church, St. Solon's Church. And I have photo envy. I went online, and I met Mr. Bellows, and he had a couple pictures online, and I asked if I could use them, and he did one better. He went out and took a better picture and sent it to me and gave me permission. So again, this is making a story about a location. So you might not know about their life there, but it is there. Now, so our story starts with Jeremiah and Bridget Coffey in the early 1800s, resided there in Caltra. Jeremiah was a reduced farmer, meaning he didn't have any land and things were pretty poor. He died in 1846, leaving 6 children between the ages of 2 and 18. And what was going on in Ireland at that point in time? The famine. The famine years were 1845 to 1852 officially. So we talk in emigration of push and pull figures. So the push out probably was the famine and looking for a life for their oldest son who came over at age 20 in 1848. The pull to Greece, we don't know why, whether there was other family. There were no other Coffey's families in Greece at that time. I don't know Bridget's maiden name, whether one of her family was there or other people had migrated here. So we don't know, and we won't ever know, most likely. The following year, his brother Patrick comes over. But sadly, about 1851, Mom Bridget dies. leaving the remaining children, Michael, James, Ellen, and Mary. They sailed over here to meet up with their brothers. The 1855 census shows us that the two boys were residing on farms where they were working, and they were different farms. So they were obviously not in a position to house their siblings or financially care for them. We find the four siblings in two different farm families recorded as servants. And whether these people took them in through compassion or whether for it's an extra set of hands around the house or the farm, we don't know. But the 1855 New York State Census gave us a little bit more information. We are very fortunate that James's son wrote a book about life in early Greece. Without this book, we would never have known that the 6 children were definitively related, because after they left Ireland, none of the children lived in the same household, ever. So we would not have said that these 6 Coffey children and young adults were related. And this book has helped me along quite a bit. The other problem we have in Greece with finding information is we had no newspaper until 1935. So, and our Rochester Democrat and Chronicle and other iterations of it were not very chatty, especially about poor orphaned children. Of the 6 siblings, only Patrick stayed in Greece after 1860. We know that by censuses. And some of the descendant families still remains in the area, actually quite a few family members. Next page. My family, again, my mother's family had no pictures. But in researching, I found a Barbara Marshall, who had this wonderful picture of Patrick and his wife, Eliza Jane Marshall. We do know through church records, the Rochester Church Indexing Project online, and also the microfilm is available at Rundell Library, that they were married at Mother of Sorrows Church in 1857. They farmed by censuses, we know, in Shalott at first, and then in Greece. And on the maps, we were able to triangulate them on the corner, and where were they? I get mixed up. They were, where were they? I'm lost here. Let's see. Oh, they were on English Road between North Avenue and Long Pond. So, next page. How do you know? We don't know anything about this, but you pull the 1870 agricultural census for them. Patrick Coffey is here at the bottom, and you see this number 110. I'll tell you what it means. It means he has 110 acres of improved farmland, meaning there's a house, a barn, cattle grazing, crops. He has another 14 acres of woodland. And then he has 15 acres of, as God intended, natural, nothing that's been improved on there. The census, which is usually 2 pages long, also told us that the land was valued at $13,000. Not too bad for a man that came over during the famine. He had 11 horses, 6 cows, and 10 pigs. So he had a pretty prosperous farm for the era. The crops were the usual Greece crops of wheat, rye, hay, corn, potatoes. And he also had forest products, also known as lumber. As many in Greece did, they moved to Parma and continued farming. Greece and Parma have a very close relationship. A lot of the children of our families that pioneered here often moved to Parma. I assume there's more land, it's less expensive, those kinds of things that push them over there. Patrick Obit, next page, confirms that his place of birth was in Caltra, mentions nothing about his siblings. And he did have 8 children. At his death, I went down and got wills out of surrogate court and said that he left his farm to Daniel and an unmarried daughter, Teresa, and cash bequests were given to the other children. Patrick's other sons had farms in Greece. Of course, you go on with your life. You don't wait for your parents to die to start your life, so that's pretty normal. And the daughters married other Grecian western suburb farmers. So as you can see, and then the next page, Again, another photo that my mother's cousins didn't have of the family. It's awesome. And Patrick is sitting on the ground. He died in 1911, so there was photography at the time. And his wife, Eliza Jane, is the second one on the right in the upper row of women. So we were able to put together a story where people said there isn't a story. So that's a good way of using things. On a side note, next page, Patrick's son William had a farm at 1128 Manitou Road. And when I first started researching the family, it was just this vacant lot. I know the house left the family in 1945, so I don't know when the house came down. But it is now the newest park entrance and trailhead in Greece. And it's the west entrance to Greece Canal Ponds, and this is what it looks like today. So again, have curiosity, look around, look outside the box. You can make a story when there isn't one. The other thing is, I told you that the remaining siblings went to Illinois by 1860. Two of the siblings heard the call of the West again. In 1862, Mary and the family moved to Colorado, and in 1885, James and his family moved to Nebraska. James related that he came to Greece in 1851 to meet up with his older brother. There's two books, the one I showed you, and this one here by Marilyn June Coffey. She wrote a historical fiction based on the James Coffey family and their ultimate endpoint, which was this very nice spread, Cassbrook near Stamford, Nebraska. She passed away during the course of this book, but she did talk to me about some of it, and she was very fascinating and wonderful sharing her information. And so between the two books, the earlier one I showed you and this one, James says that he came to Greece in 1851 to meet up with his older brothers, but shortly afterwards was working for Mr. Wiley on a dairy farm. He worked from early morning to late at night, at first for his keep, but as he got older, he got some compensation. His first purchase was a suit. After a few more years of work, he got a horse. It's really important these days. Then he moved out to Illinois, where he worked as a farm laborer. He served in the Civil War, and then married and had 10 children. Got to have those kids to work on that farm, you know. Just before the 10th child was born, it is said that he heard the call of the West again and moved to Nebraska, initially living in a log cabin and eventually ending up pretty prosperous. So that's kind of funny. Greece was their stepping stone. Yep, that was the story again. And we'll go on to the next one. Mary Coffey was one of the middle children. She was 14 when she was orphaned and sent to meet up with her older brothers in Greece. And after living with a local farm family, she met and married Scottish immigrant Henry Templeton. He was the only one of his family who came over. Their first child was born in 1856, and I was able to get this from Janelle. It's not very good, but it's something as far as the family is concerned. The following year, they moved to Illinois from Greece, where they farmed and enjoyed some prosperity. But then the Civil War started, and Henry was very upset that due to health issues, they would not accept him for service in the Civil War. So he picked up his family in 1862, and with the assistance of a hired herdsman and his 6-year-old son, they traveled in a covered wagon, pulled by a yoke of oxen, accompanied by their herd of 50 cattle. They paused in their trek before crossing the prairie, where they met up with 100 others to form a caravan as they were heading into what was then treacherous territory. There was safety in numbers. After making it to Denver, they headed south to a land claim near Manitou Springs, where they set up a sod house and fences. Shortly after, they sold out. It didn't quite work out very well, and they ended up going to Old Colorado City, which is now part of Colorado Springs, where they had a log cabin. The family grew to 8 children, and they had some success, but then there was a grasshopper plague, and Indian raids were quite lively in the area. In fact, they had a stockade that Henry helped the town build so that the women and children could be locked up during the raids and be safe. And that was all shared. So Henry later scraped together some money, made some fortuitous land purchases, and when the railroad came, he made out really well. And then 2 houses later, he ended up here, Templeton House, that still stands in Old Colorado City. Mary, unfortunately, died of creeping paralysis the year before. Next slide. And we do have pictures of the family that I was able to get from Janelle, of the daughters. And again, the sons, James William Cassius, and some of their workers at the camp wagon. Adds a little bit more color. So for my mother's cousin saying there wasn't a story, there was. So again, look outside the box, branch out. This probably was 100 to 200 hours worth of labor. It's not something you just find. Looking through newspapers, coordinating with 13 descendant family members and working with them. And the next page, it just doesn't end when they give me the information. I always do a draft. And I'm a nurse, retired nurse. I'm not a writer. Thank goodness for Maureen Whalen, because she fixes all my grammar and she wordsmiths for me. But I send them a draft. It gives me a chance to double check my dates, that I'm presenting the family in a way that they want their family presented. And sometimes they then go out and realize they've been slacking. They could ask some more relatives some more questions. And so sometimes I get things back. So it's a double check for me for proofing. They don't have final say in what gets used. It gets honed down a little bit. But again, they're given the opportunity to comment.
What I'm going to do is, for those of you who haven't read the first book, I'm going to throw a little tease out with some of the families, some of the information that we found about different families. And then for those of you who have read the book, this is the kind of information that we always look to find to put in our files at Greece Historical Society. So if you have something of your family that you think is of importance that you want to make sure gets saved for generations to come, please let us know, and we'll take on, we'll try to help wherever we can in terms of finding out information that you don't have, and in return, if you give us the information, we don't need your original photographs. You can just give us information, and we can scan the photographs, and you keep your originals in your family. So we just want the information, because after we're long gone, we want generations from now to come back and look at us and say, here, look at what these guys did, and here are the people that lived in the town of Greece. So I started with the McShay family. Not because I was interested in the McShay family, although my husband and his brother had Miss McShay at Mother Sarrow's for a teacher, but I was doing a book about the Odenbach farm, and I kept running across this name. I go, McShay, who the heck is that? So we found out who the McShays were, and luckily Tom McShay was a retired sheriff, and he had family albums. And I started by looking at the property, which is, they owned everything from Ladder Road to Round Pond by Dewey Avenue there, that entire section on the west side of Dewey Avenue, they owned all the way to the pond. And I started looking up their property, and I found that the two sons had come over here from Ireland in 1841, which is considerably before the famine. But the very next thing that I found, and this I have to thank Tom for, because he had the original passenger list. They sent for their mother and father and their sister Kate and their brother Michael. And along with them came the Brazils, Michael and Ann. Ann Brazil was originally Ann McShay, which we found out because of this record. And the Brazil mother was Margaret. So here it is. Now, the interesting part about this is I had seen this online at Castle Garden. Castle Garden no longer has a website. They incorporated it into Ancestry. You no longer get to see these passenger lists from Castle Garden. So luckily he had this printed out and put in the family album. So they came in 1847. Now, the map on the left shows exactly, where they were. Guess I can't. No, it doesn't want to work. Sorry, but you can see where it is, where the arrows are. They're on both sides of Dewey Avenue. They had two houses built on the east side of Dewey, too. And then there's the farm on the wood, and the family standing in front of the apple tree. Now, the interesting part was I was at Cornell University with my friend Jack. We had gone down there. I don't know what we were looking for, Jack, but we went down there, and lo and behold, I found out that they had the early baptisms, all the Latin baptisms for the first time from St. Ambrose. And this is right before they built the new church. So luckily, thank God for his sister Anna DeSales at Nazareth Academy, I could read Latin. So I wound up looking at the information, because most everybody today, I mean, kids can't even read cursive anymore. So Latin's beyond the pale. So anyways, the thing that I found out is that one of the Brazil boys was baptized here. So one came over from Ireland and the other one was born here, and who James Brazil was the son of Michael and Ann McShay. The godparents were James and Catherine McShay. And Catherine, her last name was Rigney. So here's Ann McShay. She married a Brazil. Her husband died, and then she wound up marrying Patrick Fleming. And our friend Maureen Whalen, who did all of our typos, and she did yeoman's work in terms of correcting all our grammar, making sure that we were up to date with all the new English commas and semicolons. She's related to that. She's related to that family. Now, neither one of these things could I put in the book about the family. Here's the photograph that I found. I never got permission from the person who posted that, and so I could not put that in the book. And then on the right-hand side was the 1860 census, which showed the Brazils living there, and then Rigney was also living in that farm. And I can't use census because that's owned by Ancestry, so you can't put census records in there. What I did find out, though, is I remember when I first came over to Greece Historical, Lorraine Bean was the executive director at that point, and she said, well, all these Irishmen, they all settled here because the fertile land, they really didn't have anything to do with each other. Well, thanks to Joanne and I, we found that to be not true. All of these families that are familiar Greece families for 200 years were all living within 30 miles of each other in Ireland. So the McShays were the farthest west, and the Rigneys, Whalens, and the Flemings were the farthest east. In the middle was Nicholas Reed. There were no Reed descendants left in the town of Durrow. I talked to the priest. I talked to people that remembered the Reed family name from the cemetery. There were no Reeds left. They went to Limerick from there. So there's nobody left in the original town where Nicholas Reed came from. And then the Wheelahans were Nicholas Reed's. He had a wife and a son that died, and he's buried in the mother's house, so no living children at all. So he had nephews and nieces. They were the Wheelahan family, so they brought them over here. But the other family that was equally as important as that have never been written about are the Ryans. The women were Ryans, and they married Wheelahans. So in terms of finding pictures where you didn't think anything existed, this Daniel Sharp, who came from Northern Ireland, he came to Greece to work on the canal. He originally emigrated to England, where he married and had two of his children. I ran down the baptisms of the two children that were born there, and they both died before they came to the town of Greece. Why he came to Greece, I don't know, but I assume that he started working on the canal in the eastern part of the state and then just came west. And I was contacted by the great-great-great-granddaughter, and she colorized the picture on the right-hand side, but she had the picture of Daniel on the left. He was very prosperous. This is probably why he had a photo taken of himself, which very few people did early on. And then the interesting part was, in the family photo album, they had come over to Greece. The woman I had talked to had never been to Rochester at all. She lives in Syracuse today. So her grandmother came in the 1920s, and they wanted to see where their people were buried. So they came to Mother Sorrow's cemetery. On the left, you see the grave of the mother, and on the right is the original way that grave looked before the cross was taken off of it. So you can see the not only the tombstones, but in the back, that's one of the few pictures of the shed that was where the school sits today, across Mount Reed Boulevard. That was the shed, and the parishioners rented the sheds for their horse and buggies to come to church. And then we also found in the cemetery, there's a James Sharp. Well, there's no information about James Sharp. I couldn't find anything about him. Well, lo and behold, Colleen had the picture of James, and there is his tombstone that you can see in back of Daniel Sharp's. He was the older brother. Daniel's sister was Catherine, and Catherine married George Quinn, and there's a picture of Catherine, it's a chalk drawing that she had, and then the colorized picture on the right-hand side of George Quinn. And the interesting part with George Quinn is his farm was between Nathan English and my husband's great-grandfather, Captain John Burns. He lived on English Road. Is that it? Yeah, okay, just wanted to make sure I didn't, no. Okay, the find for this family wound up being, I should actually have Bill tell this story. These people called the Historical Society and wanted to give us a picture of was it a horse?
Deer or moose.
A moose. I was going to say moose, and then I thought horse.
Up their house.
Yeah. So they wanted to give a picture, and unless it was the horse was born in Greece, we really, that's not the kind of thing that we would take. But Bill offered to go over to their house, and they had an album. They didn't know who the people were. They were marked, little pieces of paper were marked and thrown in the front of the album. And these people said, well, we have no use for it. They were in Farmington, right? In Farmington. But we have no use for it with a society like it. Well, that was a gold mine. It wound up giving us the Rowley family, the Combs family, the Phelps family, and the Lochner family. So, and in this, they had the picture of the earliest Rowley that came here, North Greece Road. Samuel Sabra was born in 1823, and he was 3 years old when his parents moved to Greece. The area on the right-hand side, unfortunately this won't work. The bottom left is the, I'm trying to think of what it is now. It's an insurance agency, right? And across the street is the DeMay Hotel. So you're looking east down Ladder Road, okay?
Wait.
And that's where their house was, is starting there and going further south. There's the picture of the house and the picture of the farm barns. And all of these were in the album that this woman had that she didn't know what they were. The Andrews family, many people know Captain Andrews as being running the Windsor Ferry for 26 years. And the interesting part about the family was that I got a call from a nephew who lives in Geneseo, and he says, I have a family album, would you like to look at the pictures? And I said, oh, sure. Well, it turned out to be the entire talk about this, the entire family, which we didn't know anything about other than the captain and his children. Come to find out, there's a house on Ladder Road, which we'll show you shortly. The house was built by the father. We always thought it was built by Captain Andrews, but it wasn't. Captain Andrews came from Scotland, wound up, he was a shipbuilder, and he stayed for many years in Canada. Got married up there to a loyalist. She was from eastern New York State, and the family disappeared up there. Well, he brought her back. I don't know how he got her back there, but they came back and settled in Lockport. And he worked on the canal there, and then they moved to the town of Greece and built this house on Ladder Road. And in the family album, there's a picture over on the right, and it says, "This is where I was born." And if you look, the house is still there, and it's got the anchors between Hampton Boulevard and Greenleaf, right? No.
Marine Whalen.
Well, yeah, but they don't know where Maureen lives. I was just gonna say,
West of the-
Maureen Whalen lives right across the street from this. So we all thought that the captain built this because of the anchors. Come to find out, because of this album, we've got the information about the generation before, where he came from in Scotland, and the fact that he's the one who built that house.
Right by Fleming Point.
So, yeah, right by Fleming Point, across the street. And there's, on the left, there's the actual photograph of the Windsor, and Brian's father worked at Kodak, so, got free film, got slides, so he had a picture of the captain, which he later colorized. But on the right, that's the money picture, because there he is after he's retired. The boat, the ferry's in dry dock, and there he is standing on the stern of his ship.
Where did the ferry go?
Well, it sat, where Pelicans is. It sat in dry dock for many years, and then it just.
Yeah, but where did they use it? Between what points?
Oh, it went from Charlotte to Arundequoit. It was a ferry across the river. Yeah. And there's the captain's house. He did not build this house because the house is much older than the captain would. So he must have moved out of Ladder Road and then moved into this house when he got married. And there are pictures on either side of the black and white pictures from the photo album from Brian. And this is a weird story, which I couldn't make it up if I tried. Senator Joe Roebuck, his mother Terry, I knew her from Holy Cross. She knew that I did a lot of history for Charlotte at the lighthouse, and so she says, "Marie, this woman Joyce, she's very ill, and she's got this album. I didn't want to just throw it out. Would you like it?" So I hung on to this picture. Had no idea what it was. Start doing the Andrews family. Here's the picture, not only of the Andrews family, but them very young, holding their little children. Brian's grandmother is the little baby in there. The little boy who's sitting on the left-hand corner there is Nick Carroll. He ran the brush factory down on Water Street and down on River Street in Charlotte. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the Captain Andrews is holding Ida. His wife is holding Emmeline, who's Brian's grandmother. And then Ida and Charles Hannes. Hannes as in Hannes Terrace. Okay, and Charles Hannes was the last person who was president of the village of Charlotte. He was also elected alderman as soon as Charlotte became part of the city of Rochester. So there's him and his wife. So now this picture not only makes sense, but it made sense because the hand, I'm going to go ahead one slide, because there's their house on the left-hand side on Hannes Terrace, and Hannes Terrace was originally named Patton Park, as you see on the 1902 map on the right-hand side, and I'll tell you the rest of that story in a second. So going into Hannes, I went and I had a friend who had looked up some it's called Gopher Records, and he does research at the National Archives. So I called him up. I said, hey, can you get the packet about this guy? He served in the Civil War. He died. He's not buried in Rochester. Can you help me out and find him? So we went, and there's a lot of pages that are in the book. I only put the one photograph in here. When he joined the Civil War, he was captured shortly, and he was originally part of the Rochester Regiment, which was the cavalry. 2 months later, he got captured. He was held as a POW in Camp Parole, and then he went back to his unit, and then he died. He had appendicitis, and then he wound up with peritonitis, and he died. He was buried 3 different times. So I've got pictures of all of his graves, and because they bury him once, right when they die, then they take him and put him in a cemetery. Then they came and did a national park, and they came and put him over there. So the guy got all of his information, and I put that in the book for him. And then when we came back to the Hannah's Terrace part, the mother was a widow. She winds up marrying John Petton, who you'll see a picture of him in a second. But her son, Charles, built the house next door. So now we've got 2 houses that we know who built both houses because of the interesting information that we found in the book. And then over in Lake Methodist Church, which was next to Brothers Collision, I don't know what it is now, Caliper or something, on the west side of Lake Avenue there, almost to Holy Cross, there is a stained glass window dedicated to Captain Andrews' daughter, who died at age 11, Olive, and then Hannah and the Andrews. So when you get to the picture, we've got Emmeline Bunce, who was the mother. So she's the widow of the captain who died in Virginia. So that's the picture of her that was from that photograph that I got from Joyce Nesbitt, okay? And then she married another man by the name of Buell. He died 4 years later. She married John Petton. Well, lo and behold, the stone collection downtown, if you look at that, there's pictures of Petton. He lived to almost 100 years old. He had 3 wives. And look who he's talking to. But he's talking to Mrs. Hannah's, who always, everybody that I talked to from that family said she always dressed to the nines. And you can tell. There she is as a little, a young woman, in her early 20s with her hat on, and there she is as 80-year-old woman talking to a 90-year-old John Petton. So, and his house is still there on Lake Avenue on the right-hand side. So just north of Petton Street. But then they wound up, since Hannah's, they gave the name to Hannah's, since Charles became the alderman for the city of Rochester, they changed the name from Petton and named it after his father, James. So that's why now you know the story of Hannah's Terrace. So now we're going back to another very interesting family.
Anybody know the Bonesteel family? Or heard of them? There's a street.
You have watched at least the beginning of that one, our Women's Month special for the snapshot.
Yes. Okay, next one. So the Bonesteel family had a home on Ridge Road between Bonesteel and Carlisle, and it was recessed back. And one of the descendants is Jessie Bonestell, is what she went for. She was an actress, director, producer, theater owner. So she's the other person of note, and her dates are 1871 to 1932. So this is another short kind of case study with how you can get information. The family was nominated for inclusion in the book by 2 different family members, Barbara Benedict Madison and her sister, Deborah Benedict Thomas. And the Benedict family also were pioneers, and they were, where Ridgemont Plaza is where that family lived. They're also in the second book. They're fascinating, so read about it. So they included 2 families. But unlike the first family with the coffees, where we used a lot of crowdsourcing to get the story, no other family members came out of the woodwork on this one. So I had to be creative using the newspapers, digital books. There was a business owner that owns a building that was built in 1845 that still is in the building. He let me tour the house, and this is the one where I got the college theses, 2 of them, to help put together a story on Jesse. So the Bonesteels were of German descent. They came to America in 1710, where they settled in Rhinebeck in the Hudson Valley. They also helped found the town of Red Hook. And so we need to fast forward to 1827, 2 years after the canal opens. We have Henry Bonesteel and his wife Anna Sears, who were likely married in Rensselaer County around 1817. You're ahead a little bit. Sorry. They had a daughter named Catherine, and she happened to marry an alderman who later became the mayor of Rochester. So hence she was prominent. Our Rochester newspaper let her tell them some stories. And she talks about how in 1827, her parents traveled by a packet boat down the canal from Rensselaer to their new home in Rochester, along with their children. Their farm was at 1 Smith Street and abutted the Genesee River Gorge. And as you know, shallot and grease are kind of the same at that point in time. Henry's business property was at the corner of Lake and Lyle, which is where State Street, if you go south, is Lake turns into State. So that's where they are, Lake and Lyle. He bought the Frankfurt Tavern, and this is Rochester Images at the Public Library. Put your last names in. Sometimes you get some pictures. And they're very good. You no longer have to pay for use of the images, and they'll send you a real high-quality image. So he bought that, and he ran a tavern and a hotel. It was a coach stop and a business place. In 1843, he then put a building up here, and it became the Frankfurt Institute. And it was an educational place for classical languages, writing, and art. And the owner, Thomas LeBoux, very nicely gave me a tour of the building when I stepped by. And he's not sure if this is the original building or part of the original building, because neither the city of Rochester nor his abstract tells him the full story. But there might have been a little renovation around 1875. So we don't know whether it was just a renovation or whether the building went up at that point in time. So we got that information. Henry moved to Greece in 1843. And his son Joseph takes over the tavern. We can go to Joseph. So when Henry moved, you can see where the map is. This is the 1872 map. And the house wasn't that close to the road, from what I'm told. And then Barbara very nicely gave us a picture of the house that was there. So his son Joseph got married and took over the hotel and tavern, but his wife, Helen Lavisa Norton, was from Webster, so they went and farmed out in Webster until shortly before his father died, and they moved to Greece. He still kept the other things going. Joseph was a lawyer by trade, and he was also a farmer and businessman. He had 11 children with his wife, 2 of whom died young, and most of the children were musically gifted. And what we're going to do is, there's Joseph there, that Barbara gave me a picture of. And then what we're going to concentrate on is their 5 lovely daughters. A great picture. It's even labeled, which is wonderful. The girls here had a pretty good education for the era. They went to School 11, which is the lay school. And then as older students, they went to Nazareth Academy, which was then at a mansion on J Street. And they actually boarded on, and the lovely Sisters of St. Joseph and their archives were able to send me information on that. And most of the girls also went on to post-secondary education. Again, not usual for that period of time. So Ada here on the upper left married Alva Benedict, and they're the Ridgemont property. Georgia is fascinating. She was a music teacher and a suffragist. I found a newspaper article of her attending Susan B. Anthony's 80th birthday party. So real fun things. And then she also takes over, after Susan's death, the Political Equity Club, which was founded by Susan's sister Mary. She was the president of it. And during her time, in addition to getting the women's right to vote, which was women's suffrage, the group also focused on tackling other women's inequality issues, such as expanding educational success, and they were able to obtain University of Rochester admission for women. They provided legal aid, and they were working on improving labor conditions for women. So she's a pretty impressive woman. Ida is Ada's twin, and she's in the upper right, and she was a teacher in Buffalo teaching English and German, and she married one of the faculty. The lower left is Lillian, who was a music teacher and performed at local musicals. And then in the right is Laura Justine, also known as Jessie Bonstell. We're going to go to the next one. So she's better known, as I said, by Jessie Bonstell. And according to a story, she had a 4-part article, and they interviewed her. This was not available when I did the book. I ended up finding out about it through college theses and was able to quote some of it. But since then, I had looked eBay, I'd looked everywhere. It was not online at all, but McCall's magazines of this era are now online. But she herself tells the story that her mother, when she was met with a fortune gypsy woman, as she was approaching her 40th birthday and already had 10 kids. The gypsy woman told Helen Lavisa that she had been living 2 lives, one as a wife and mother, and in her dreams that of as an actress. She also predicted that she would have another child, which she wasn't too happy to hear about, who would not only be ambitious and special, but would fulfill her dreams of becoming an actress. And that was Jessie. Through newspaper articles, they were spiritualists. So even though that she attended Nazareth Academy, they were not Catholic. We found detailed information and news accounts that Jessie started performing at age 2 in a spiritualist church. She was known as a child elocutionist. She had amazing memorization skills. She played a number of instruments. She attended the elocution school at the Valentine Hall in Victor, which is the Valentine Museum. They were able to give me information on her. Her stage debut was at the Baker Theater in Rochester, and she went on performing with seasonal stock companies with her mother accompanying her when she was not in school. In 1900, Jacob Schubert offered her management of a stock company at the Rochester Lyceum Theater. From there, she grew as an actress, company manager, director, producer, and eventually owner of her own theater. Oh, that's one of the college theses. I had 2 of those. And she did it on her old typewriter, for this one, and she couldn't find it in her house. It wasn't the digital age. And it took me literally weeks and hours to get this out of the galleys at the university. So she had to threaten them because they said that they would keep a copy and make it available. And so that was the only way we got it. Okay, next page. So anyway, and then we'll go a couple of pictures of her. And this was her theater that she owned in Detroit. Originally, it was a temple, a Jewish temple, and some backers got it for her. And she lived on the 2nd floor, and she acted and produced in plays. And after she died in 1932, things weren't going very well. Plus, it was a little rickety before she left because of the Depression. But Wayne State University took it over and used it for their theater program until a few years ago. And then most recently, the Marriott built a hotel next to it with a glass walkway and have rehabilitated this into an event space. So this is pretty cool. And right now I'm working with John Bassett, who's a retired university president who worked with our Rundell Library to get information from local history on Jessie's early life, then contacted Bill at GHS And right now, I'm working with him on Jesse's early life. And we're digging a little more into her early life, and that's where the Sisters of St. Joseph came in to find proof that she went to Nazareth. So anyway, this is pretty exciting. A little side note is that she was spiritualist. She did believe in the afterlife. Her family was that way. She also belonged to several other religions, but and she did live there. And it's felt that it's haunted by her. And to the point where in the Wayne State Student Handbook for drama students, it lets them know that things might go bump in the night. So what I thought was a really good quote is magazine writer Mary McHenry in 1974 in a Discovery magazine wrote that Jessie, her soul was the theater, and now the theater is her soul. So I thought that was pretty profound. So some of this information comes from family. And the rest of it came through just, storytelling, just deep research and looking in different places. This one was kind of fun. I don't have a better picture than the Google picture because Historic Detroit requires $125 per image, and they hold every blasted professional picture of this. So it's a little steep for me. So anyway, she was a delight. Okay. We have a couple more quick things. Are people willing if we run over?
We're supposed to leave by 8:30.
Okay, we can.
We'll be done in 5 minutes.
Yep.
These are the fun things that we found while we were researching. When I was doing the McShay family, came across a letter that was signed by George Eastman thanking John McShay for his trip. He got some wild turkeys. They shot turkeys, and he's thanking John for the trip and for the turkeys. Photo album bought for $5 at a garage sale. I was doing a program at the Charlotte Library, and this woman came in and she said, "Would you like to look at this? I don't know who these people are." I said, "Sure." So by the time I took the album, we had identified everybody in the album. She was a Kirk, and she took pictures not only of herself and her neighbors' houses. She happened to have a picture of the Manitowoc trolley, one of the open air ones. There's very few photographs of the open air trolley, and the left there's four pictures on a page. I only put the 2 pictures, and the Manitowoc Beach Hotel is there. The Wheelahan Hotel, very few pictures. In fact, I only know of 2, and this came in about a week before the book was going to be published. The woman contacted Greece Historical Society and said she had this picture. So I worked with her, got the picture, moved the chapter around, and got the Wheelahan family in there. So also, when it came time for a family that left here, the Burns family, the Michael Burns family, this is a picture of them in Michigan, and they left here in 1869 because they are listed in the 1870 census in Michigan, and very prominent family in Michigan. There's a story of Michael, working without his glasses at age 92 out in the field. There's pictures of the field, and contacting the Sisters of St. Mary of Moore, got the picture of the woman who was in that photograph. That's the nun. She postponed becoming a nun so that she could take care of her brothers and her father because her mother had just died. So then she joined the convent, and she taught for many years in the school. I was in contact with the archivist there, sent me all sorts of information, which is in the book, about the woman's history. And then I happened to get contacted by 2 of the cousins. One's in Michigan, one's in Arizona, and the one in Michigan is a genealogist. So he's written books about all of the families, the Irish families who settled in Hubbardston, which is where he's from, in Michigan, and he wrote all these books about the Catholic Church that's there, the cemetery, which is like our Holy Sepulchre, and a book about the people that moved to Hubbardston. So Joanne will tell you about her findings.
Okay. Again, looking outside the box, everybody knows of Buckman's, right? And Homer Buckman. Well, Buckman Road was named after his father, George Buckman. This was their farm. And again, I didn't get any local pictures. Homer's daughter died, did not marry, and I've been able to find her ice cream machine and her dresser and a whole bunch of stuff, but I can't find her photo album. So Homer's sister, May, got married and moved to Michigan. Guess what? Look what she had. She had pictures of the home on Buckman Road. So, and she also had pictures of young Homer, young Burl, all sorts of things. It was, go get the book, it's wonderful. I presented them in another education program. But anyway, I went looking for this house, went up and down the road, and the only two-story house that's on the left side of the road is that one. And it doesn't look like that one, although you can see some. Well, that happens to me where my mother grew up and her father grew up, 163 Buckman Road. And between the time the Buckmans, there was one owner for 3 years, and then my great-grandparents bought it. And it is indeed the same home, because I couldn't believe it. I had to make sure, but there are some features that are in. I went down to look at deeds, and sure enough, it went from Homer Buckman to the Middle family to us. And this is my grandpa, James Riley, who also grew up like Homer and the other kids there. And to make that go full circle, Deb Cole's aunt and uncle bought the house. My grandmother, just a quick story on her great-grandmother, she would not, my mother was living in the 1950s, going to Nazareth, and the only modern convenience they had in that blasted house, because her grandmother, who raised her, would not, while her parents worked, would not allow anything other than a kitchen pump. They still had an outhouse. They did not have electricity. They went to their Johnson cousin's house on Stone Road to take a bath and use the phone. So right after great-grandma died, my grandmother had a house built on the frontage. They still kept the farm. The Verhalses actually farmed the back, the Statial Verhalses, and moved into a modern house with all the modern conveniences. And the Cole family got the house without the modern conveniences. Okay, this is another story where you go looking. The Justice family came to the area in 1837. And in 1844, they bought a house. And there's no street addresses. So I did my usual, I'm curious, killed the cat, whatever. And I parked on Maiden Lane between Long Pond and North Avenue in the middle, where I thought maybe the house might be. And where do you look at houses? And the clue's kind of giving it away to tell if it's an old house.
Basement.
The foundation. So here we do, I'm part of the house. We've got a fieldstone foundation. There was a gentleman sitting on the porch while I'm looking at this going, "Can I help you?" And I said, "I'm looking for the Justice house." And he said, "You found it." And then he went inside the house right at that moment, and 5 minutes later walked out with the abstract. He was able to tell me a story that under the oldest part of the house, it was held up by tree trunks with the bark still on it. So again, kind of a fun story, and that family and their descendants had no idea that this house belonged to them. Okay, we can go one more quick one. As my husband says, we've been kicked out of all the best countries in Europe. A lot of my families were in Greece in 1850s and never written about. Elizabeth Faker's husband, Joseph, was a carriage maker and farmer. I had been looking at the corner of Ridge and Dewey forever for agricultural pictures. I have millions of cousins. None of us have pictures, no matter how far out we go. So this is one of the ones where I went looking at the Glass family, because they own a lot of land around us. And I didn't find any direct Heman Glass who owned it, descendants, but I found his brother's descendants who had written a book, but they didn't have any pictures either. So I go and look up Heman Glass. He's in Notable Men of Rochester. There is not a blasted word on him in either Greece Historical Society or the Greece Historian Office. He was the first president of the Greece Grange. So you just never know. So I guess nobody looked that far down the road. Oh, back one more again. So to look for cues, because I went looking and I see Seed House, and I had done the Vic story. And what do seed houses have? They have catalogs and seed packets. You can go. So I went to an obscure repository called the Biodiversity Heritage Library, where I found his seed catalog and some seed packets. Again, looking outside the box. And then on the next page in that seed catalog had pictures. So, and then Heman's right here in the back, right on that one. And so it gives renderings of the barn, the house, and some of the workers. And thank you to Bill and Marie for fine-tuning these pictures because they weren't very good quality, but we do have something. So again, have curiosity, look. As many finds as we have, there's not finds. You know, my Faker family is still a disaster with whole finding information, and they belong to me, and I still can't get as good of a story as I have on others. So, do you want to finish up?
Just real quickly, these are one slide apiece. The Hincher family, when I went through the descendants, I contacted probably about 45 descendants. There was one lady who lives in Syracuse who had 4-generation picture of her family out of a family album that was taken in 1951. And the little girl, the lady who gave me the picture, the little girl who's being held there is her younger sister. So we got that picture. Sanford Meach and Sarah Curtis. The Curtis and Meach families are big in the town of Parma. They came over to Charlotte and bought the house at the corner of Latta Road and Lake Avenue, which was the Latta Meach house, it's now known as. And the photograph that I got from Dave Crum shows Sarah as a young child, or a young girl with her sister, and then Johnny Meach, the one on the right, the arrow goes to him. He's standing there as a little boy. He was a violinist. The Meach never had any kids. They adopted him at 7 years old, and he was playing the violin for a man in Cleveland and wound up in Charlotte, and adopted him, wound up running the Charlotte Coal Company. So the only known photograph that exists of the original McShay house, which was north of the Parkway, is here in their family album. It burned down, and the one that everybody knows as the McShay house is now closer to Dewey Avenue. And the McShay sisters, 3 of them became nuns. 2 of them wound up being very important in terms of running schools down in Texas. Here's a picture taken with the Bishop of Dallas. So I sent this to the diocesan office down there. They were happy to get a picture of the bishop. In terms of the Clark family, they came over from England, and we were doing the Clark family was prominent through the Civil War, and they moved here. But when I went and started looking at the in-laws were the Wood family. So in terms of the Clarks, the Clark family goes back to the family that came over and founded Rhode Island. The priest over there started Quiddick Island and wound up founding the Second Baptist Church right after the first one, which was founded by Roger Williams. In terms of the in-laws, found that he served in the War of 1812 and his father served in the American Revolution. There's a huge plot at Fall Cemetery, which should have been the first clue that they were a prominent family. Nothing had ever been written about them. Never saw the word name ever written in Greece historical stuff. So, and then George Latta's house, that's the Latta Meach house today. Across from the Latta Meach house, it's a plaza today. And we had a photograph of the Kenmore Hotel, which was George's original house. When it burned down, we're standing at the backyard of the Latta Meach house across the street and watching the fire when it burned down in 1943. And May Sage contacted a relative, no Sage relatives left in Rochester, and she had pictures of her great-grandmother who worked at the Charlotte Telephone Company, which is where Master's Deli is, the corner there of Studson Street. So there's 2 pictures of the interior of the Charlotte telephone. And then the best part of doing this for both of us is for people to meet other family members. We had a chance to introduce cousins from different families at Greece Historical. And then on the right-hand side, Tim McShay from Minnesota was coming here to visit the cemetery. And I said, well, would you like to meet your cousin? He lives in Henrietta. And he goes, sure. So they came to Greece Historical and met there. So in closing, we just want to give you some research advice for you to do your own family.
And if you are someone here that's contributed to us in either book, we appreciate very much what you've done. This project would not be what it was if we didn't have our descendants. So talk to your family members, write things down, keep it in different media. Are people going to unload your computer 100 years from now? Probably if you put it on paper, you might see it. Share, use local resources, look outside your main line. Store things at Greece Historical Society, spread it around so that your family history doesn't die out. Google is your friend. They have books that are out of print, that are out of copyright, and you can just look through them. Google Books is a phenomenal resource. Many of them are historical. And there's many free and paid genealogical research. People complain about the cost of Ancestry. It is somewhat instant gratification. But when I first started doing this 40 some odd years ago, I had to pay and go out, and like a weekend away would be, hundreds of dollars. Well, I can do it from my living room now for hundreds of dollars for a year. So it's not a waste. And also Family Search, the Mormon site, is free. And then just have curiosity, explore, and make it fun, Okay? There you go.
Thank you very much.
I do want to say that it's not all work. In her research with the Buckman family, she wanted to expand it on how the Buckman family became the Buckman Dairy. And we all remembered the kitchen sink. There's not a photograph at all of anybody's kitchen sink.
This is the most fun piece.
The Happy Days restaurant, which was only open a couple of days, I went in there one day and there's the kitchen sink. And I said, where did you, well, I talked to Ralph DiStefano and he says, yes. I gave him the recipe. I told him how to make the sink. She went out and bought the kitchen sink at Happy Days just to have a photograph of it, right?
Yep. Yeah. Again, be inventive, make a story where there may not be one.
Does anybody have one 4-minute question?
Any questions?
Yeah. Over there.
Bonesteel family. I grew up very near Bonesteel Street.
Yep.
And you said there's a house?
The house doesn't exist anymore. And so where it would have been, it was recessed back from the road on ridge between Bonesteel and Carlisle. I will tell you that gravel pit that's back there was there at their time. And Jessie used to use it as an amphitheater when she was practicing her acting. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? All right. Thank you for coming out.
You can find us on YouTube at Greece History. You can hit that subscribe button down below to get subscribed and click that bell icon to get notified when there's new content from the Greece Historical Society. You can visit us on the web at GreeceHistoricalSociety.org. You can find us on Facebook at Greece Historical Society, and you can stop in at the Greece Historical Society at 595 Long Pond Road.